Welcome everybody to Gray Swan Guild's Atelier number 10. We've made it to double digits here. This one's a good one today. We, as much as we've spoken about climate change, we really haven't done a deep dive on it. And so my hope is we'll spend over an hour today talking about various elements of climate change and get into a breakout discussion with a lot of you today on where this is all going. If you can predict it, you're probably better than most of the people that are well-moneyed and well-researched, trying to figure out where this is all going. We're still having some people join. We'll get the proceeding started at about 9:05, but just for those that are joining us fresh, might be a couple new faces. A little bit about what the Gray Swan Guild does. We are a collective of people that try to make sense of the world's biggest challenges and next gray swans. We do it through content, we do it through events, we do it through intelligence, we do it through a set of ventures that we may end up talking about at the end of this session together. And we do it as a global community of people that really like to go a little bit deeper than most. And we colloquially call ourselves the 50 Shades of Gray, because you'll probably end up in a breakout room today with somebody that may be completely different geography-wise or discipline-wise, but has probably the same thought in mind, that loving to get past the superficial, loving to be passionate about both their craft and the world around them. So that's kind of who we are for those that are joining us new. We're about 2 minutes away. I know John was regaling us with Hulk Hogan's vaccine recommendations. Any other really good tidbits before we get into the topic at hand today? Nothing as brave as Hulk Hogan's comments, I suppose. I know I was mentioning, I found this to be the case about 3 Christmases ago, where it's like there's just a spate of celebrities that have just died over a period of time. And I don't know why. Maybe I'm just more attuned to it over the holidays, or maybe they really have died at greater frequency over the last 10 days. But it really does feel like part of my childhood has gone from me over the last couple of weeks. All right, it's about 9:04. People are still joining us. Agustine, if people come in, I'm going to hand you over the reins just in case. And Rob, I see you there too. Hopefully I can make you co-host as well, and just invite people in that decide to show up. So welcome everybody. We're dealing with climate change today. Hopefully we'll tackle the faces of and the consequences with and the solutions for climate change. And for those that are metrically inclined, we realize probably 98.4% of the world is actually dealing with Celsius, not Fahrenheit. So it is about 2.5 degrees Celsius. We only used the 4.51 because we thought, you know what? Ray Bradbury had such a great book in 1953, Fahrenheit 451. Of course, they were burning books in his future view of the world. In our case, we switched the decimal a little bit to 4.51. And we're talking about, potentially, if I use the metaphor right, burning a planet. So have a look at the 1967 movie too. It tends to get overlooked, but I actually kind of liked it. So we usually start all of our meetings, whether they make sense with the theme or not. Thankfully, this one does make sense with the theme, but we usually start off with good news because sometimes there's such short abundance of it in regular media. This comes from my home country, Canada. So first of all, for those that don't know me, I'm Sean Moffat. I'm one of the co-founders of the Guild, and I'll be your host for today's discussion. We ran across this article. It's called Passive Greenhousing. I'm not too sure if anybody's aware of this, but it uses no energy whatsoever. And even in the most northernly, or I guess southerly of climes, you can actually grow food. I think in this person's case, he had come over from China. He was looking to commercially scale this type of greenhouse, and was growing it in way the hell up north Alberta, which, trust me, it's very, very cold, and had managed to grow about 30,000 tomatoes inside of it last year. So no energy. Certainly there's some upfront costs that kind of get buried as you save energy over time. So I thought, consistent with our theme today, great solutions. We're going to talk about more solutions later. So it's funny. I don't know, Rob, if you want to chime in, or if you have access to your mic, but we just did a post the other day about 21 gray swans that we thought might happen in 2022. And it was really negative. Like, we got really negative. There was about 17 of them that I would probably say kind of went on the pessimistic side. And so I like to at least find at least the ray in the cloud on this topic where I can. And I guess this was my my best attempt here, where at least across a palette of 17 countries around the world, people are actually taking this a little bit more seriously. I've certainly sensed it within popular media. My hope is you're sensing it in your world. Rob, I don't know if you're off mic. Are you sensing it in your world?
Yeah, it's and I'm my background in business is in insurance and technology, and it is a top 10 issue. And that's one of my jobs, is to present top 10 issues in the sphere, both for business and insurance specific topics. And top 10. There's not one major insurance company in the world that doesn't have climate change and climate effects as their top 10. What are they doing with it, and how are they doing it? They've changed across the cycle in the last 5 years. The insurance industry has changed all of reinsurance around extreme weather, and we still are not caught up. On the silver lining for some people, I do know that in the past decade and a half, there have been a series of pretty good-sized German hedge funds that have been buying property north of Sudbury, Sean. This is northern Ontario, where nobody lives. It's empty, literally. It's one of the wide open spaces left in the world, and they're buying that land. Normally, it's frozen, not tundra frozen, but they're betting that that land will turn into arable land. It was not arable land 40 years ago. So they're going to win on a bet on property in Canada.
Well, the science is probably behind them. I wish I could say something better about some of the irrevertible courses that we're on here, but certainly it makes sense, I suppose, from an investment standpoint. I myself have thought, you know what, if I was really callous about this, I might kind of take a 25-year investment view of some patch of northern Ontario property. I think Janet,
Sean?
you had a hand raised up, Janet.
Yeah, so I'm Canadian, and I live on so greetings from the traditional and ancestral unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people in Ottawa. And so when we think of a hedge fund, at least they're bringing some of this, perspective or news or sector into the daily lives of people who may not be paying attention otherwise. But I have to challenge the comment that the land up north was, really available and, for use, and it's been bought up by a hedge fund. The land in Canada has long been owned by original people. And certainly somebody owned it, right? Certainly somebody owned it.
They're buying it from the current owners that have gotten it in certain ways. They're buying it from the government and Crown property. That's what I meant, clearly.
Yeah.
Because that's the construct. It's not that I didn't make an ethical judgment on it.
Yeah. So the sensitivity of, the Indigenous people and their land is certainly one key solution about how to move forward on climate change. And if we turn to them in every transaction we do, we'd likely actually shift how we're doing things, because they have a view and they've been surviving longer than most of us can in cities. So I just wanted to at least bring that perspective here into the circle.
Well, we are going to pivot to solutions in the second half of this discussion. So I think certainly I think there's some made in Indigenous solutions, whether it's Canada or around the world, in terms of where we might be able to go with that. So before we get into kind of the conversation part, because I think for most of our events, we like to make at least half to 2/3 of our meetings kind of more conversational and interactive. We do want to have a little bit of a level setting I'm going to share a couple of different things. I'm going to survey you a little bit, see where everybody's headspace is today. And then we'll get into a discussion on the second half where we'll put everybody into breakout rooms. We've got a really good number for the 6 breakout rooms that I'm thinking of. And then we'll hopefully turn this into something after we host this meeting today. So I love this visual. In some respects, I think myself and Rob and a number of other people in the guild have been thinking, you know what, our guild was born out of COVID and the pandemic, but you know, over the last year, certainly it's either been very front rear view mirror or it's been, wow, is this going away? You know, certainly in our neck of the woods, and I think most part of the world, it's here to stay for a little bit, but I think right behind it, there may be 2 other big waves. One, perhaps a recession, and 2, you know, this ever existential question about climate change and what to do about it, how to solve it, how to deal with it, and if it's going to happen, I guess how to cope with its effects. So I thought this was a pretty prescient photo for our discussion today. So I thought to myself, when we came up with the theme Fahrenheit 4.51, I thought, wow, that seems like a very high amount of temperature increase. I wonder what that is reflected versus some of the scientific judgment that's out there already. Lo and behold, it wasn't that high at all. If you look at where people think kind of our expected level of carbon in the atmosphere, where our red dot is pretty much where 4.51. So the not even the policies that are in place that have been enacted, but certainly the ones that have not been enacted, you know, they are going to be required to be in place just to get to this elevated level of temperature. So it made me kind of feel a little bit negative about today's discussion, that I'm already dealing with the low end range of where we think we might be going with this. So my hope is we have a few problem solvers here today. So I got a question. We've picked this somewhat arbitrary number, but we know that the world is trying to stay under 1.5 degrees Celsius as it's, you know, please don't go beyond this. You know, anybody have any thoughts in terms of what might happen if the world increased by 2.5 degrees Celsius? I'm inviting any thoughts, John?
The ice caps are melting, and therefore a lot of people that are currently living in areas that are potentially going to be below sea level are going to want to move to areas that are not. So it's a big challenge, right?
Yeah, the great benefit of living on a coastal property is when oceans go up by more than 1.5 meters, you tend to be underwater. Any other thoughts? I know 2 participants.
One of our greatest, sorry,
One
of our biggest challenges is going to be fresh water, bizarrely, I think. And I think the race to find reservoirs, I think, you know, is water the next frontier, has been on our minds for quite some time. But I think that'll certainly be the case.
And you're coming in from South Africa today, where, you know, Cape Town just last year, I'm not too sure when it was, but just had its own scare. I think that may be repeated in cities around the world. There's another hand that was risen there.
Yeah, I live in the downtown core of Ottawa, and with that temperature rise, I can anticipate that roads will be melting, because they've already started to melt in different places. And the roof that I have on my house, it's not an earth roof, a garden roof. So it's probably going to melt as well. And what else in our basic infrastructure will be melting before we eat, as we wake up in the morning. So how we've built our environments versus what we will need, I'm not certain that we have enough time to make the shift.
No, it's both for species and I think for some of our infrastructure, Janet, it's happening really quick. Paula, you've got your hand raised.
Hi, everyone. With the increase in temperature, you're going to see a lot of people taxing or overtaxing our electrical systems, trying to keep everything cool. And that will lead to breakdowns in infrastructure, transformation towers, just all of the electrical infrastructure that we have around our cities that are knocked out with, high increases in heating in the winter. Well, the same thing will happen in the summertime. or wherever there's excess heat, because people will be frantically trying to cool things down.
It's funny, anecdotally, I had seen or at least experienced the number of blackouts and brownouts, but I hadn't any stats to prove it, Paula. I ran across one that said since 1980, we are now experiencing something on the order of 10 times as many blackouts or brownouts than we did just 3 or 4 decades ago. So so there's some quantitative evidence there.
I felt it actually, even in my own neighborhood. I've just since the pandemic's been around and having to work at home and use much more electricity and with the internet, everything is connected to the electrical grid. I've noticed even in my own neighborhood more brownouts, temporary blackouts, temporary electrical cuts, which I never once did before. So they wouldn't have happened very often, and they're happening a lot more. I also lived through a lot of brownouts and blackouts when I was living in Peru for about a decade. So, their infrastructure is not great. Here, ours is better, but everything will end up breaking down.
Yeah, well, let's go along down some of those dark roads, shall we, Paula? We've entertained the whole notion of being in the dark. I ran across a few things that pegged it precisely to 2.5 degrees temperature change. Essentially 50% of the global population will be exposed to heat waves, which is about 30 times what we experience currently. Sea levels may go up, and there's a big may here, may go up by about 0.7 meters. But if the ice caps go, all bets are off. They could be going up anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 meters, which certainly puts New York and a few other very popular places in the world underwater. More than 50% of land gets exposed to extreme rainfall, 5 times what they were before. One overlooked part of this whole equation is mosquito ranges. At least in arid conditions, they end up, gathering in 40% greater areas. Anywhere on the order of 500 to 1 billion people both will be displaced and experience some level of drought they'll have to deal with. Pretty much over the course of the next 70 years, if that happens, we will have no coral reefs, and at least 25% of environments will flip over to a different environment. I know living in Canada, there's a huge northern boreal forest who is a prime candidate for probably switching over to something different, which as much as people would love warmer weather, I guess, don't count your blessings, because it's there for a reason. And then finally, 50% of marine and 30% of endemic land species may, in fact, go extinct given that level of temperature change. So some pretty grave stuff. And if you think you're immune, think again. Here's a photo done by NASA of where the sensitivity areas are. Certainly, my boreal forest ends up being in the high red category. Outside of maybe a little bit of part of Great Lakes and part of Africa, most of the world gets impacted quite heavily. So I think this is one where we are all affected. But unfortunately, I don't know if we all know that yet, because I'm going to throw my North American cousins under the bus by saying, look, it's a global concern. And we might have been dealing with more space and more resources than some of our other continents. But as you can see, the difference around the world, we kind of experience this crisis a little bit differently. So and how did we get here? My hope is we don't have to get into climate denial or whatever, but I've looked over most of the good research reports out there, and there's really about 10 different reasons that we've got here today. If you look at some of the studies, they would say over the last 200 years, our temperature has already gone up anywhere between 1 to 1.5 Celsius. And so what we're looking at is, taking that an extent further. Fossil fuels, deforestation, harmful waste, power plants, transport vehicles, consumerism, factory farming, industrialization. Anybody else want to throw another chief cause or reason for why we're here today?
Overpopulation is a pretty good controversial one, something we've been good at for a long time, making babies.
Yeah, that's a very good one. I think we may be past peak planet. So it's, I guess thus our pursuit of Mars and other places, but we may have to wrest that one under control. So I think some of these are the known knowns. Janet, you've got maybe another one?
Yeah, I'm going to bring in my integral coach perspective. So from the level of consciousness, world, it would be a risk aversion. And people are stuck at the orange level. Yeah, they're not willing to see another option.
Very good. I think we kind of, in most of our ateliers, we have to tackle that one, don't we, Janet? Just this one maybe has a little bit more risks and stakes involved in it. So the one thing I will say, I think on this topic particularly, I find there's a lot of passing the buck. Because we say we need to change these things. And typically, I know, in at least North American terms, we always say, I am going to make this my number 1, 2, or number 3 reason why I'm going to vote for somebody. And invariably, we don't vote for those people. And so whether it's how we behave, and I think in a North American developed world context, there's about 16 tons of CO2 per person that we produce each year. You could, in fact, look at adopting any 10 of these things and make a major dent in that. And on the flip side, I looked at the US election and where people put their key election topics. Of 12 different things in the US, climate change was viewed as their 11th most important. So hell, there might have been other things that might wedge it out of the way. And so when I think about, is there going to be any real action on this? If I'm sitting in Joe Biden's shoes right now and I care more about my midterms and whether I get in next time, if he runs next time or if somebody runs, I might not be so concerned about climate change, regardless of the crisis that the world might have. So I've got a survey here. I'm going to take it off. I'm going to ask you guys something. Who should be most responsible for fixing climate change? Is it companies? Is it governments? Is it international bodies like the UN or UNESCO or whoever? Or is it people like me? And I may have biased the witness on this one by lecturing people about personal accountability, but we'll see.
Yeah, and including a typo. It's obviously all on you to fix, Sean.
I always put those Easter eggs in for people. Just
Where's the all of the above, Sean?
No, I like forced choice polls just because it allows people to have to make a choice.
Janet, tell Sean to add all of the above.
Yeah, Sean, I'm glad that you asked that, because I was just thinking before we came to the poll was, we are all of a certain age, be it, a young generation or, moving towards 60 or older. And where were we 20 years ago when people were in the streets marching on climate change? And where have we been? What has our personal journey been in the last 20 years on this topic? So there's something about, if you're a young child and you're looking at this and it's like, oh my goodness, it's new. But for those of us who have known about this issue, what is our story? And how do we come to this today? And so how do we use the learnings of that story, right, to move forward in a way? So, accountability for us, it's certainly there in the cluster. And for me, the question is it more or less accountability than them when we continue to focus on what government is doing? So I come to the conversation today with that question in mind.
It's a great context setter, I think, and maybe not even 20 years, Janet. You go back 50 years. I mean, flower power, kind of energy crisis. We had this as a front page topic a while ago. I'm going to shut the poll down now. Let's see where people were. We got an even split between people like me and governments, with a little bit of a tinge of companies. So I don't know if it's statistically significant.
No one picked the UN. No one picked the UN. Wow.
Yeah.
That's the most telling group thing here with people of a certain age. That's
the UN has a lot of convening power, but doesn't have any actual power.
Well, I'm going to ask another poll in a second. So just when you thought it was okay to go back in the water again, here's what people said are in 31 countries around the world that got me a little bit upset because depending on how they answered the question, I think this really is a passing of the buck. Because you know what? How do governments get into power? It's they're voted in a lot of places by people like you. And so, yeah, I find unless there's some personal traction here, we might not make a dent in this topic. So second survey, how will climate change affect you the most in the future? And let's see if I can manage the tech and get into another poll here. The miracle of Zoom. Here we go. So I'll describe these a little bit. Your day-to-day life, just living every day, 9 to 5 or 12 to 12, just your day-to-day experience. The economics of the world will change. You know, I know Rob had already mentioned insurance off the top. Your health, your personal health and the health of people around you will be massively affected. The biodiversity of both species and ecosystems will be affected. Life itself, your mortality, and your ability to etch out both survival and a living, or society. Society will come to its knees, both from a political and a military and a crime standpoint. I'll leave you with that darkness for a moment. And I see a hand up, but I don't see a name, so I apologize. Is that Rob, unless you can help me? Whoever does have the hand up, please.
Yeah, hi, I raised my hand up.
Sorry, Zizi, I just couldn't see
I
your
raised
name
my
there.
hand up.
Do you have a thought, Zizi? Nope. Maybe not. People are getting the hang of the poll thing. I will end the poll in a bit.
Mute, Zizi. Yeah, he was on mute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah, so there was this question about what the UN is doing in relation to climate change, and I would like to add that I work with the UN, UNIDO, and we run some projects, some programs that is to help in climate change mitigation. So UN is doing its part to ensure that most countries will be able to meet their quota for.
Wonderful. You might have got cut off there at the end, but
Luis, thanks for invoking the UN. It's glad that they appeared for us on cue.
I'm going to end this poll. We may end up talking about the UN, or at least some solutions around that. Maybe not surprised here. Biodiversity, certainly the polar bear, and I always say people don't care about the environment until the polar bear shows up on your front doorstep. But biodiversity gets number one, with a little bit of society and living falling into silver and bronze medal. But day to day, everything got at least one vote. So I think people understand the broad range of effects things have. I pulled together this bingo card. I don't know. My mom used to be a bingo player. I guess I'm a big fan of bingo. 24 possible effects from climate change. And we're going to try to group these up in our breakout discussions today. I'll top line these just really, really quickly, and I'll invite anybody to add their own thoughts, maybe as I finish them up. So our day-to-day and 4 subcategories I came up with, how we build our homes and where we live, how we live, what our real estate's valued at, our diets, our consumption, our travel, our technologies and utilities and energies that we use, and how we make a living. How do we go about having a career, and the freedoms that we may assume are ours now might not be there tomorrow. So that's kind of some angles of day-to-day life that if you end up in that breakout group, you may talk about that. From an economic standpoint, economic loss and collapse, and we're looking in the trillions of dollars here based on some projections I've seen. You might have thought, wow, getting that boat stuck in the Suez Canal last year really interrupted supply chains. Try having a few hurricanes hit places that don't normally hit every year in terms of interruptions. Certainly, if you look at most of the cities, they're planning for higher taxation, and I think most parts of the world are paying more for their grocery nowadays, in part because of supply chain issues and climate issues. And Rob, you were mentioning insurance and property loss. You know, if you end up having a massive hurricane hit New Orleans again and they go underwater, how much of an appetite are insurance companies going to have to actually reinsure your house again? From a health risk, both starvation, we talked about mosquitoes and malaria spreading, heat waves, which presumably will affect older and younger people and poorer people disproportionately. And then extreme weather events that maybe lead to some mortality rates going up. On the biodiversity, complete ecosystems being wiped out, species both stressed and being extinguished, drought and agricultural collapse, we're seeing this already, and invasive species and pests, and what happens when different prey and predators actually end up in the same environment over a small period of time. Will coastal cities just disappear? Or will they become like Venice, and how will we have to adopt? Will we find water scarcity being one of the biggest challenges of our existence, inequality and poverty? And will our cultures and values be under attack? Will the things that we assumed were true may not be true any longer, and maybe we'll have to run based on different systems or different institutions? And then finally, in the biggest category on the side here, geopolitics, will there be haves and have-nots, and will there be friction between those two? Will we have war and military conflict because of climate change? Civil conflict and lawlessness. I know as I was preparing for this with Rob was saying, yeah, we could be in a world where governments just are powerless because people just need to grab the resources they need. They're going to steal tomatoes and strawberries and things off farms, and who's going to stop them? Could be. And then massive emigration. If my billion people that may be displaced based on either flooding or fires happen, who are they and where will they end up going? So I'd invite people to either go off this list or provide something off this list for a few minutes, and then we'll start our breakout. Any reaction to this list of consequences from climate change?
I think what you've highlighted under the health category, Sean, of disease, the increased health risk of known disease is what I would call that, where it's spikes in malaria, spikes in cholera, dengue fever moving north. But everything that's happened in the last 2 years indicates to me that there's either a sub box there or a whole other box on the emergence of novel diseases and pathogens, which is definitely associated.
Yeah, and certainly UN's predictions would be some of these potential diseases would make this current pandemic look quite paltry by comparison. Deborah, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, hi everybody. I think we're missing intergenerational conflict in society as well.
Say more on that, Deborah.
There's a huge gap right now between what youth think and feel and know about climate change and what you and I and elders know about climate change or are willing to do about climate change. So there's potential goodness that could come out of that, but there's also potential conflict, huge.
I love it. That's a really good build and add, and makes it a true bingo card. I think 22, that makes it 25 now. So you'll be the middle square. Any other thoughts, either things that are off the board that weren't on here or something that just needs to have a double click because it's just so powerful and important?
So inequality, Sean, when I see that word, the same thing with the geopolitics friction as I bring the word, the phrase climate justice forward, which is huge. So as we are looking at our decisions, who do they impact? What's the whole life cycle of our range of decisions because of the impact on the South in our economy, and what choices do they have in the justice chain?
That's a great point, and certainly given previous history on this topic, it seems to disproportionately affect poor people, people of color, young and old, and maybe different types of conflict and inequality in the future. Deborah, did you have you've got your hand up? Yep. Oh, maybe not.
Nope, sorry, I didn't take it down.
Just doing the Arnold Horshack there, just so wanting to re-emphasize your point. I love it. We're going to have a breakout group on some of these. My hope is we can throw people into 6 different groups and get enough people in each one of them. I'll play the foil and whatever is the least popular join. But we're going to.
Can I say one thing before you do that, Sean?
Yep.
So maybe to make this easy or to get people's ideas or moving, think of a movie or a film or a series you've seen recently that where you've seen all of these things happening, and the film or the series acts like a simulation of what it might be like. That'll help to. I'm thinking of one in particular that I just finished seeing. So it's hitting all of those boxes.
You willing to share and bias all of us?
Sure. Snowpiercer. Watch that. It's a doozy. It's a microcosm of our situation. It's a simulation in an I can't even say it's enjoyable. It's fascinating to watch, but it's definitely riveting because all of the things that we have on this board have come to pass in that series. So definitely suggest that you watch it. It's on Netflix. The series, what is it? Season 3 is upcoming in the end of January. 2 seasons already. It's mind bending and it's awe-inspiring at the same time. So.
Wow, if you were any more ardent about it, I thought you might be working for the studio. You love it this much, right? Wow.
I kid you not. I liked it better than Look Up. Look Up was an interesting movie. This series is just it's something not to be missed. If you really are interested in how are we going to be able to live through this and what happened in this series and what can we do better now that we still are in time to deal with.
Wonderful, really good, and a good futurist principle as well to look at archetypical storylines and fiction lines to look for some inspiration on where things may end up going. Deborah, you've got your hand up. I don't know if it's still up.
No, it's up again. So I was just thinking that if you took a week of news, you could track all of these on it now. You don't have to go to fiction. This is happening now. It's just going to escalate, I think. Anyway, unless humanity comes together and does something brilliant.
You mean like a news type item with a wrap of the weekly news about climate change and the great, the good, the bad, and the ugly, Deborah, like that?
No, I mean like take the headlines out of your favorite news stream and just map them against the climate change bingo. And I bet every one of those is covered every week.
Different lens, I like it. That's a good report, Sean.
Well, I think Deborah is invoking the William Gibson line. The future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet, right? So, yeah. So coming to you, neighborhood near you soon, I suppose.
Nathan, what about the interactions between all of those?
Yeah.
So that's like they're individual discrete things that will happen. But the reason why not to say you have to watch Snowpiercer, but what I was fascinated about was the fact that how do all of these problems interact with one another and cause ripple effects down the line? No pun intended.
In Toronto, they have a series that goes on once a month, and it's called Talk Climate, and it's women who come together. And in 4 weeks, when we looked at the impacts of climate, to look at ways for, let's say, if we're feeling anxiety, to kind of dissipate a bit. People talked about, like I look at all of the bingo slides, and it's whether they've experienced, their family has experienced, or friends of theirs, or people they know have experienced these things. It doesn't take very far, right? And it's not just that it's been happening this year, it could be happening over the last decade. So you take 100 people, even this group, if we went through and said, who knows? But within this group, somebody knows or somebody has experienced. I look at water scarcity. I'm in Ottawa. Across the bridge, Gatineau has had boil water advisories approximately every 3 months. over the past couple of years. And water, water has been an issue in Ontario for a while, and other places in Canada as well, and around the world. So how far do we have to go? It's not about them. It's really about, within our world and about us.
Yeah, you may be right. I think that may be one of the silver linings of the pandemic, us starting to realize that we are kind of a global village, aren't we? Nathan, I'll go to you first, and then Mitchell, and then we'll break for breakout group, because I know people do like to get in smaller groups and kind of meet people and kind of get at the meat of it. But Nathan, I think I tripped over your wire with my William Gibson line. So what's up?
No, that wasn't it at all. This is the comment about seeing these things in the news. It's just reminding me of one of my possibly snarky observations about the present with the news coverage of the situation in hospitals and pharmacies, and with supplies and vaccines and testing and everything, 2 full years into the pandemic, and we're not prepared. And my takeaway is, never mind predicting the future and seeing what's coming, we're not good at predicting the present, or honestly, at this point, we're not even predicting the past. Like where's the pandemic preparation for the next one, or hell, for this one? And so that to me is an overlay of this can be completely blindingly obvious. It can be already happening, and large numbers of people and large numbers of decision makers will not recognize it and will not take steps.
No, it's a great point. We've bemoaned this in other ones, but it gets to a point of outrage on this topic, I think, Nathan. So I thank you for bringing that up. Mitchell?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of climate change and other things is the denial and catastrophe factor in all of this. I think that there's a significant chunk of the global population that is in such strong denial about the climate change evidence and effects, because the end state represents such a catastrophe that instead of dealing with it, we're having enough people sort of waving their hands at it that, we're almost going to unconsciously or unintentionally will the catastrophe into reality, as opposed to getting anything significant done about it.
A true inconvenient truth, if we've ever heard one, Mitchell?
Yeah.
Vince, I don't know if I've seen you in a group before. I said we're going to pivot to breakout rooms, but I always love to get new people into the discussion early. So Vince, you've got the conch.
Thanks. So, the last 2 comments were talking about, what we are not doing re COVID, or unconscious will, effectively willing it into existence, a crisis of denial. And I was going to say, at the root of things, if we want to stop climate change, there's one thing that addresses and solves every single one of these 24 things at the same time. And it's behavior change science theory, which has not been used and is the only thing proven to be able and equipped to deal with denial. So I would suggest to everybody, if you're trying to actually cultivate behavior change, then don't look to whatever good idea, best idea you have in your circle. Go to the behavior change science and look up something called motivational interviewing. That is a proper noun with a capital M and a capital I, which is the best known behavior change process that is being used. Unfortunately, right now it is being used more by social media algorithms than anybody else to create divisiveness and create engagement on social media platforms. It is not being used by governments to resolve denial or resolve resistance, which is incredibly powerful. And I myself have had a conversation with a very right-leaning person politically, and over the course of a 5-minute conversation, they went from having us talking about Greenpeace being a scam and there is no such thing as climate denial to the importance of sustainable food and water is where we ended our conversation. So literally a single 5-minute conversation. It's called a brief motivational intervention. And if you go onto Google Scholar and you search brief motivational intervention or motivational interviewing, then you'll find a solution to every single one of these buckets at the same time.
Wow.
Vince, we always love imparting new information here. I think you've hit a live one here. If you've got, I know you said go to Google Scholar and look it up, but if you've got like one of your more suggested or recommended links, if I could ask a favor, just to post it into our chat, we'll definitely make use of it and rebroadcast afterward. But by no means an obligation or compulsion.
I've seen some applications in vaccination denialism and being applied in Quebec right now by some practitioners. Some great documentary evidence of real-time, fast interviewing like that is supportive and motivational and not attacking. So Vince, +1 for this. It's awesome to have that type of science being applied. Thank you.
And as much as we're wading into the forest here because we always have this debate, whether we're political or non-political or apolitical. We welcome all sides of the debate. On this topic in particular, though, it does go down, at least in US polar terms, very different lines. You have two different groups of people generally that don't see it the same way. And so I think what you're getting at, Vince, might be helpful in terms of taking some of those barriers down, maybe. I'm going to...
Can I just say one thing about this that has to do with what we're going to be doing in the breakout room? Sorry, Sean. I just want to. I think it might help people arrive at some solutions as well. Thank you, Vince, because that was a very important point. And actually, I'm amazed that you said that because it ties into what I'm about to say. When you're looking at your unique problem articulation and then trying to think of a unique solution. I was just thinking about all of those squares on the bingo as one extreme end of a continuum. And what would be the other, like if we wanted to ideate, what would be the other extreme, the positive end of that same continuum for each one of those squares? And then start thinking about how do we reach that more positive end of the continuum to avoid the disaster that's awaiting us. I think that might be a good way of approaching it, or one way of approaching it for solutions. So,
I know why you're such a good coach, Paula. Just good kind of informative practice in terms of how to maybe tackle this. I know we're going to break out for about 20 minutes if we can. We got 6 different groups. My hope is we populate at least 2, if not 3 people in each group. And my hope is you can come up with 5. I repeat, 5 different unique either problems, solution articulations. And let's take a basic example that we probably don't want to see just because it's already a known. So ocean levels are going to rise fast. Big problem. We should build bigger levees. We kind of know that already. So my hope is you can spark to some of the more unique or interesting or below the surface type of solutions or problem articulations that are out there. So I'll accept any one of these 3 combos, but my hope is we'll have a list of 30 of them afterward that myself and my colleague Rob will throw it through the guild meat grinder and turn into something that might be of value to other people that weren't part of today's discussion. So I am going to set up 6 breakout rooms. Room number 1 will be day-to-day, your day-to-day life. Room 2, the economics of climate change. 3, health. 4, biodiversity. 5, living, and 6, society. So I'll let's see, breakout rooms.
So take a screenshot or a picture of this with a camera for your use in the room. I find myself getting lost very quickly when I don't have the beautiful slide that Sean prepared.
Very good point. I will before we have people join the rooms, I'm not going to assign automatically. I'm going to let participants choose room. So before you go, take a picture of this, and I will back up 1 slide. And sometimes people take their phones out. Sometimes people just take it.
You always see me taking pictures of things. I'm going to post this one. It's a good one.
All right. So, and then we're going to go for about 20 minutes. So it's 9:51 now. We'll come back a little bit, 10 minutes after the hour, and then hopefully we'll share. If I may ask if somebody can be a really good scribe in your group, because we'd love to just kind of not with too much pain, take whatever you come up with and turn it into something that's consumable to others afterwards. So once again, I think the rooms, I will enable the rooms right now. And room number 1 is day-to-day. Room number 2 is economics. Room number 3 is health. Room number 4, biodiversity. 5 is living. 6 is society. If you end up in a room that only has one person, get out of there, and then I'll try to bring you back out here. Vince, you've got a quick question?
Oh, no, I probably just didn't put my hand down.
Those hands stay up for a while, don't they? A little bit
Can
of
you
a
say the list again, Sean? Just with a breath between each item.
Sorry, room 1, day-to-day, living. Room 2, the economics of climate change. Room 3, the health of climate change. Room 4, biodiversity and species and all of that. Room number 5, living and mortality and things around that. And room number 6, society and politics and armed conflict and a whole bunch of other things that we talked about.
I'm going to go to economy.
And if I can help anybody get to their rooms, please let me know.
Sean, I've got to drop at 10 sharp, and I thank you for everything you've done today. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thanks, Rob.
Bye. Oh, join room 2.
Mitchell, any help needing to get to a room, or you're good? Oh, I think you're muted. I got Trevor, Vasily, and Mitchell still unassigned. Let me know if I can help you guys.
Yeah, I'll take biodiversity, Sean.
That was Trevor?
Yeah, thank you.
Room
That's
number
4.
4. Throwing you there. Mitchell, Vasily?
I don't know. I could be thrown anywhere.
Looks like we got 6, 4, 3, 2. So economics, health, biodiversity, or society?
Health.
Health, 3. Come on, get there. All right, enjoy.
All right.
And Vasily?
Do the rooms correspond to the picture on the screen?
They do, yeah. So as you read down that left hand side. And I think we probably end up having 4 rooms. Room 2, economics. Room 3, health. Room 4, biodiversity. And room 6, society. I'm happy to bring you in if you need to. There we go.
Living with the augmented reality. So Neuralink, what, at the end of this year already? So fundamentally, will we have changed? Will each of us?
Really important, because there's certain technologies that are, should we say, on the cusp of being going to help us out of this problem, but there's large investments that are going to be required that will take a long time to be returned on, and that the government needs to sort of align themselves on that. So, you know, we had a discussion around hydrogen and you know, why are people sort of, you know, stuck on lithium, and the conversation was along the lines of, you know, lithium is lazy, right? Because it's already there, it's a consumer product, you know, and you can buy it and all that sort of stuff, but hydrogen is probably the better answer. So then we had a conversation around, you know, the fact that the amount of money that's going to have to be added into infrastructure, you know, in order to build resiliency in there. The European Union's philosophies on right to repair and the circular economy, and how that's going to, you know, potentially increase costs to the consumer, you know, potentially in the short term, but in the longer term, it's a greener thing. Yeah, and then the alignment of goals between governments and companies, and how sometimes they're slightly out of sync. Yeah, so quite a good conversation actually.
Wonderful. It sounds like it. Thank you, John, for that. If you were Scribe, or if anybody was Scribe, if you could send along some of those tidbits, that would be great, either in chat or post this discussion via old school email. That'd be great. The healthcare people, the health and the climate change. Anybody have tidbits from that discussion?
I'm going to speak.
Yeah, we have lots. And so I'm going to start with the health risk on starvation, disease, and extreme weather. And we started with soil health. So lots popping up for us. You know, from a starting point, you might think, okay, the problem is green agriculture. And so the solution is regenerative agriculture, permaculture, and we can actually provide some, you know, visuals in terms of the differences on that and why it's good. But where we talked about life and the importance of soil. So it's the relationship, not just us to soil, but it's the soil back to us. So the regenerative concept comes through things like the body biomes. It really depends on the health of soil. We need to gain a greater understanding of the role of our intestinal biomes and how soil relates to that. You may know, or you may have heard that, you know, the best thing for children is to play in soil and to basically develop their antibodies. So get them out there playing dirty and get them away from the bacterial soap, right? So messing around with the biomes in the soil. The fourth area on this is what happens at the end of life. You know, it's the human connection from in terms of infinite. And we have this thing about embalming the body, lots of toxins, looking at the alternative ways. And there's a lot of spirituality that comes into this. But if we are going to be dust to dust, it's about having us basically end our lives and, you know, be put to the soil in a natural way. There's a lot that can be said for that. We brought up in terms of the overall support for health, and we saw that there are links to other areas here, needed help with insurance, etc., is to have greater supports for mental health. And we think about the mind, the brain, but there's also the connection to the heart and the gut. And if you are involved, if you have had access to theories such as Theory U, which is leading to our future, we talk about having open minds, open hearts, and open wills that allow us to get into these conversations in a way, to have empathy for ourselves and others, acceptance for ourselves. So move to what I can do, collaborate, because we're all important. We're not just an island unto ourselves. We are interdependent. There's an interbeing concept, which is really important here. We all have a purpose. And how do we bring that into the discussion for climate change? And then there's compassion, not just for ourselves, but also for all sentient beings and with nature. I am one with nature. That's something that floats around. And so the bottom line for us is, in health, with the climate change debate, it doesn't really matter if, you know, you think it's human driven or not, the fact is climate is changing. And so what's our role to play? And that's what we talked about.
Very good.
And, you know, in short, sorry, in short, we didn't look at specific solutions to address starvation, disease, heat wave, or extreme weather, because it all starts with a more underlying, very important shift in our mental capacity to see beyond our immediate environment and shift within ourselves, this mind shift, this sense of being able to connect and collaborate and empathize and accept other people, to be able to collaborate and come up with solutions. So beyond the solutions themselves, those only come about if we are all able to align in common goals and purposes, to be able to then, you know, see ourselves as an interconnected species on and of this earth, with the earth.
So we'll start a Google Doc and we'll start writing the words down, and then we can get it expanded on.
That'd be great. That would be great. And I'm thinking about myself in my afterlife. I'm like some Japanese Zen garden for my children. Is that too macabre? Like just I don't know. I'll be in their living room or something, and they'll just, I don't know.
Yeah, there's already a movement in Ontario, right? Not to embalm people, to have them done in shrouds with natural oils, like the Egyptians used to do a long time ago, and bury people in, you know, if there's not a cemetery area that will actually accept us, then they bury them on their own feather plots.
Wow.
On the Snowpiercer series, they were composting people for their agricultural needs.
I won't bring up Soylent Green.
Saying.
I won't bring up Soylent Green at this point. They were doing something else to people's bodies, but yeah.
You guys remember that Soylent Green is a 2022 story. Like we had that Back to the Future craze a few years ago. We're in Soylent Green this year.
Nice. All right, I'm gonna pivot to the biodiversity people. Anybody want to speak?
Yeah, that's still me. I jumped on early. So we had a really nice conversation going in our breakout for a bunch of people who aren't really biodiversity experts, I think, self-declared. But we had Dieter, who's an architect from South Africa and now Berlin. Heather, who's the resilience lead for the city of Calgary here in Canada. And Vasily, who's a software developer. And I'm like a futurist foresight kind of guy. So none of us are like especially biodiverse human beings as far as we know. Maybe with a better understanding of our gut microbiome, we'll figure it out. We talked about at least 3 areas of challenge around biodiverse futures in a world characterized by climate change. One of those challenges that we perceived is that generally in our societies, and maybe this is a lag factor in North American societies compared to Europe or other parts of the world, we're really quick to sideline or ignore completely the value of ecosystem services and natural systems that are within and around and adjacent to our social systems. A solution that we could propose here is to emphasize the return on investment that you get out of putting attention and putting resources towards natural systems that connect to human social systems. And Dieter and Heather were saying, yeah, this is what we're trying to do at the building scale, at the city scale, is establish more of an understanding of return on investment rather than just the absolute value of having a nice river running through town. It's like, if we're going to put money into that river, what's it going to do for us, and how is that going to translate into our social economy? So the aggressive and creative valuation of ecosystem services within communities, within municipalities, within regions. A second challenge that we highlighted is that I think if you're in the know, or you've spent any time looking at bugs, you know that biological systems are much more complicated in terms of their detail and their degree of interconnection with each other than human social systems. We tend to design our systems biological systems tend to emerge out of natural selection and evolutionary processes over millions of years. So sometimes when people see a need in a biological system to fix a problem, they throw up their arms and say, that's nature, man. We can't fix nature. It's so much more complicated than we imagine. If we try to put in the cane toads to eat the grubs, the cane toads are going to kill everything else. It's going to be a disaster. So the solution, the frame that we were trying to move towards was a framing of more simple solutions that acknowledge the complexity of nature. And I think I'm taking a little bit of liberty with Vasily and Dieter's remarks here, but rather than just re-insulating the ceiling of your cottage to stay warmer and using some new fancy technological invention to get those extra few degrees of R value, why not redesign your ceiling so that it attracts bees and other pollinating insects? And then they're naturally going to go in there and develop honeycomb-like insulation structures to keep your roof warm, enhance the local ecosystem, and so on. So there are simple solutions. They're just not always the most obvious ones. Third challenge area we talked about. In North America particularly, but also in Europe and other parts of the world, Asia, we're living within like a 300 to 500 year cycle of biodiversity loss. This isn't something that started in the 60s or like is the direct result of DDT and nothing else. Within a 10,000 year biodiversity transformation of how ecosystems on this continent work. Since people arrived here 10 to 50,000 years ago, the ecosystem's been changing fairly dramatically. So when we say we want to have a more biodiverse province or city or region, we don't really have a good baseline or benchmark to point to and say, that's what we're trying to get back to. That's what we're aiming to restore. Because all of our recorded history here and the oral history before that is a story of ecosystem change. So where I live now in Toronto, we look around our city. One of the biggest problems we have with wild animal management is coyotes. We killed all our wolves in Ontario 300 years ago. Now we have coyotes that are getting bigger, getting meaner, getting stronger, getting smarter. This is what happens when you create a void in an ecosystem. People are losing their minds about these coyotes that have as much biological or ecosystem right to be here as we do. And we've got to figure out how to get to some level of let's deal with it and tolerate the reemergence of an apex predator in our social system without trying to control that system and like subdue that predator into a zoo-like existence, whether that's coyotes, badgers, foxes. These creatures perform services too, and we can learn a lot from their hardiness and adaptability. Last challenge area with biodiversity. In the 21st century, I think we have this growing feeling that like everything big and neat has been discovered. We're probably not going to discover any like new kinds of crocodiles living in the New York sewers or like new apes living in the forests of Borneo. Like we're probably pretty tapped out on big trees and big mammals. So a lot of people think, I think that discovery, biological discovery is done. There's no more good naming rights out there to put on anything. And several years ago, the biologist Craig Venter, who worked in the Human Genome Project, ran this neat experiment where he chartered a sailboat, went off into the Pacific Ocean, into the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Ocean, like the part where there aren't fish, there aren't dolphins, there aren't sharks. It looks like there's nothing. And he drove his yacht around for 200 miles and was sampling water every mile and gene sequencing everything that was in the water. And what he found is that even in this desert in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Ocean, 80 to 90% of the biological material you scoop up in any given pail of water is a completely new species unknown to science. And so like the other group was talking about kids getting dirt under their fingernails, I think there's an opportunity here for the reframing of discovery in nature to go from megafauna down to the microscopic world. And inspiring a generation of kids to go out and make the discovery of a new kind of tardigrade, a new kind of bacterium, a new snail, right under their doormat or in their garden, like that is within the realm of plausibility. So those are some of the things we talked about. I probably skipped over a few other of our interesting and more rigorous ideas around biodiversity and architecture and urban planning, but really interesting conversation. So thank you to my colleagues, and I'll send you some notes, Sean.
That'd be great. Wow.
Something ESG. Yeah, ESG was mentioned a lot, and I didn't mention it at all. So that's like a framework in which these could be nested.
Sounds like a great collision
for citizen science as well, for kids to participate. I remember seeing it in Atlas Obscura. So I'll find the link and I'll put in the chat.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I know, thank you for that. That was so well summarized and a great conversation. It sounds like you had. I know Deborah left us. She was our moral compass. Anybody else want to tackle our summary, or should I just go for it? Louise?
Go for it.
Okay. Nathan? Yeah, okay. So we tackled society. Deborah had a really good reference points and ideas. We kind of played assist to her goals being scored. She talked about intergenerational conflict in the earlier one, and all about, you know, how do we bridge this divide between this not only belief but really heartfelt and emotional octave range that, you know, Gen Zs and A's are having versus older generations, and how do we meet in the middle somehow? How do we educate teachers on this, and some of the difference between global north and global south on this? But at the end of the day, just changing society starts at educating people, educating the educators. We're gonna have 1 billion people displaced. How do we come up with a digital passport where it makes relocating people that much more easier in a future where that has to happen very, very quick? How do we get teens to govern things? I think, Louise, you brought up Blue Council, which I think is a model for how teens have actually done their own governance on something, trying to change the world. How do we look at augmented intelligence and maybe even augmented reality, two different technologies that maybe change the way we think about things and maybe change the way we empathize about people in different straits or climate circumstances? How do we use the plural sector and having public, private, and cause all come together? Yeah, that's what I had. Any additions, Nathan?
Just our opening observation, Louise and I both were kind of on the fence between doing the day-to-day group versus the society group. It seems like the big issues are all societal and really must be dealt with. But then on an individual level, a lot of it is making preparations, thinking about what we'll do on the assumption that the societal issues will not be addressed adequately or in time. And there's just kind of a tension there that, I guess it's hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Love it. And just a small little promote as well. I know Nathan's looking for the best books. So the best books that help you make sense of the world or this topic, given the fact that we're talking about it today, if you've got any really good books, I think some have been shared already in the text, but
yeah, I've gotten the ones out of the chat already.
Throw them in.
You haven't read the Bill Gates' climate change one is really good. Surprisingly good, actually. I mean, I thought it was going to be a bit wishy-washy, but it was brilliant, actually.
It's always good when like the 5-star authorities actually write something of consequence.
Yeah.
This is really good. We're gonna hopefully tidy this up. We'll share this video to people shortly. And then I'll send an email out to all of you again to see if you have an interest in maybe pulling together a tidy little summary of what we've done here, and crediting all of you, of course. Just as we wrap up this, because I know we're minutes over. And this is as much for you guys as it is people on listening to this or watching this that wanted to show up but couldn't. We got a few things that are going on. Next month we're doing decryptifying crypto. So it's an interesting bedfellow for this discussion, where it consumes massive amounts of energy and maybe isn't the best for climate. Hopefully that'll change in the future, but crypto for people in the real world. I'm leading a discussion on Sunday. I've really put a lot of spade work into heroes and thinking about heroes in different perspectives. And so we're going to have a discussion on Sunday, and we'll probably post 2 or 3 articles on our Medium page about heroes. Kind of an interesting piece. We're on fire right now on our Medium page. We've got more traffic than we've ever had. It started with 2022 gray swans. We looked at 21 different gray swans for the year. We then summarized a discussion called the praxis of future thinking. And then I summarized a survey that was done amongst our guilders around the daily habits of future thinkers. So if you've got 10 or 15 minutes on your hands, those are 3 really good articles. We want people to sign up for ventures. I know I had a really good discussion with Trevor last week about our future and sense making for teens. And so if you want to be part of any of our ventures, just go to the bit.ly GSG Ventures. Be great. Next Wednesday, it's new members. God, we got more people joining this month than we ever had. We're eclipsing some records now. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, just trying to manage all the traffic flow, and we're throwing some light on Montreal. I don't know if people know Montreal, but a couple things based on today. It's really cold, it's really creative, and it's really French. So there you go. There's 3 things. But if you know
French with an American accent, huh?
Exactly.
It always blows my mind when I hear French being spoken with an American accent. I'm like, oh my god, this is really weird.
Have you tuned into all the climate work they're doing and the acceptance of the community there of climate change, of climate action?
Well, I mean, you know what? I'm going to say no. So you want to give 10 seconds of space for that? What are they doing?
Well, they have a climate organization that's been there for quite a while, and they mobilize, right? So it's focusing on cities, but I can get more information over to you, Sean, because one of my Climate Reality Project colleagues has been very, very in them. Like, I don't know if I can find all the information because I've been reading it over time, but it's a pretty large movement.
They've got a great history there too. I know the legacy doesn't count for much when you're looking at climate action, but 1989 Montreal Protocol is signed there. 2 years later, 100 countries plus have agreed to eliminate ozone depleting substances from their economy. So I think it's also got this fascinating historical record of something that actually worked.
Yeah, they have the international offices of a lot of the UN organizations there in the downtown core, close to in between downtown and Montreal. And they were a leader as a city for citizen action with the peace and disarmament movement, in the early 80s as well. So a long time. I am originally from Montreal, and so I know a lot of those players.
Well, when we end up doing post-COVID events where people can get in touch with each other safely or whatever, we'll maybe think about doing our first guild event up in Montreal and make sure John goes and comes up in January when he has to go through the tundra of Montreal. And I think that was it in terms of formal announcements. I really do want to thank people for joining. I think we switched up the time a little bit today. Who knows? Oftentimes you kind of want to get more people, but I know even though it was a small hearty group of people today, there was no compromise in the conversation. I thought it was really, really strong and really good. I love everybody's passion here, and I hope we can make something out of this. So thank you, everybody. And yeah, I'm done. Off with your days.
Thanks, Sean.
Be good,
Thanks, everybody.
I'll do my Hill Street Blues. Let's be careful out there.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thanks, Paul.
No problem. Sean, for the crypto index series that I just put in the chat,